So here we are for our Q&A, and it's great to have you, Louis and Chris. Thank you for being ready to answer questions. It was really interesting to me that you both approach architecture from very different points of view, yet on the other hand, the importance of culture, the importance not only of daylight, but of the people are fundamental. Your economic models are quite different. Your pragmatic models are quite different. I think in architecture, we need both. We need inspiration, we need experimentation, but then of course you also have to respond to the clients that you have and the company that you have. Louis, there are some questions from the audience, and Chris, there are some for you as well. But let me start with the one that came in a while ago, and this is for you, Louis. It says, from an economic perspective, would you state that your way of handling daylight in your buildings is your value proposition in comparison to others?
First of all, I just want to say thank you, Chris. It was an amazing presentation. I think that have to be said, and it's super inspiring. I think it's more complex than that. It is part of the value proposition, but it's not the only one. I think that the reason why daylight is so important in it is that it's an everlasting quality. You can't redo it, or basically you could maybe take the whole facade off or something like that. But that is something that won't be touched. In many projects we are doing of these, and now very big projects we are doing, we know that the structure and the facades, the entrances, the lift lobbies and stuff like that will never be touched. It'll for many years. But all the interiors will be shifted 100 times. So if we get that right from the beginning, the skin, the volume and all that, we know, and it works, and it can, let's say, adapt the daylight and really take it in on the right way. We know it's a long-lasting resource, so that is part of it. But it's also in these processes to be able to, let's say, evaluate and prioritize the money you have in the project. There's hardly, the worst thing you can have is a client who says, I have an unlimited budget and I have no brief. Do whatever you want. That's like, what can we do with that? But instead of saying, we have this budget, we have these aspirations, which we're always trying to tackle. But it's our role as architects, and our responsibility is somehow to, in the best way, make use of them. And I truly believe, again and again, that the daylight and the human factor is the ones that are the most long-lasting. It's not the technical solutions.
Mm-hmm. Now, someone has also asked about, in northern countries, to you, which comes first, thermal comfort or lighting? Or can you separate them, perhaps?
Strange enough, I think, well, you could, but that light comes before.
Okay.
And I think if you look at a perspective for like 10 years ago, you would say thermal comfort. But things have changed. 10 years ago, there would be hardly anybody sitting outside in a winter day on a cafe in Copenhagen. Today you have it, because there's been a bigger acceptance of the change, but you want to, let's say, almost harvest the scarce daylight you're getting in the winter. That's why you sit outside. Mm-hmm. So this prioritization of it is kind of changed. Of course, it's a cultural thing. You've been to Paris, you sit outside, stuff like that. But it's not a given. Maybe 10 years from now, it's different again. But right now, the daylight kind of wins.
Okay. And Chris, I'd like to ask you as well, what is the value proposition of your firm? If you had to express something, would you identify daylight, or would it be another approach to architecture?
Yeah, I mean, daylight has a lot built into it already. I think daylight has a lot what I was talking today as well, a lot of playfulness, and you can create different spaces by different illumination. So I think that that it has already a lot of these kind of spark of creativity and curiosity and sense of discovering already into the daylight by structuring spaces differently. So, for example, having a good balance of maybe dark circulation spaces that then gives the freedom of a bright room with a big window. So I think one cannot be designed without thinking about the other.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Here's another question that just came in for you. Someone said they really like your way of doing architecture. It's a much happier way of building. I love that. I love that adjective, a much happier way of building. But they want to know, how do you find a client in these projects that seem so inspired but self-inspired? So how do you find your clients?
And if I could amend that just a moment, amend that by saying, I think the origination of your idea came from your 3 years of practice and exploration. So how was it once there was a client involved, and how did that process evolve?
Right. First, I want to say something to this happy approach. I like this, that it seems this way, because it really somehow is. We first started our office in Beijing, as I mentioned in the talk, and we somehow felt there's an office that we are in this hamster wheel, always trying to get bigger, growing as a team, getting more important projects and getting more famous as architects as well. But somehow, since we then moved our office to the mountain, this definition of success completely changed. And now I would really think that a successful architect is a happy architect, especially when they are young, because we all know that the best architects, or the prime age of an architect, is maybe in his 60s or in her 70s, and it would be really a pity if you don't have the motivation for architecture anymore once you get really good as an architect. So we try to stay as happy as somehow possible for as long as possible. For how to then find clients, I think that sometimes this process of working with a client is very fruitful, but it's also a lot of times very intransparent, because creativity, what goes on in an architect's head, is very a client cannot look into this. So then you bring something to a client and, they are not happy with it, or they are happy with it, but they don't know what to expect. And this can be thrilling on one side, but it also can be somehow a dragging process on the other one. And that's why we actually do this self-initiated project as well, because we somehow turn it around. So, okay, this one we come up with. Who is the client who shares our vision to build that? And there are really a lot of people, if you turn this around, who share a vision. So, for example, for Bird, we then published it, and it got really widely published. We were very lucky there. And I think we got, 150 emails from potential clients who wanted to build it and go this route with us, and this process of getting it built. So it felt, there's really this kind of market to turn it a little bit around, and this also makes then the process much more transparent. So if a client now comes to the office and he says or she says, I want to have this bird back there, we can immediately ask, okay, what do you want as an interior? 2 bedrooms, 1 kitchen, and so forth. And we have then a script that builds 5 different versions up. We can tell immediately how much it costs, when it can be delivered, and how this process goes. So this makes somehow this whole process also very transparent with the client.
Very interesting, Chris. I find it really...
Oh, and
go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't answer the other question, how we found our first client. We lied. This was a very good business model back then, that you lied about your size. So actually, it was as well a kind of an interview like this. The client was on the other hand, on the other side of the computer, and we just shared us, and we had on YouTube office sounds in there. So it sounded, there are fax machines and telephones running, and we have a big office, and afterwards we got all of this. We got people, we got phones, and even a fax machine. So maybe we didn't lie, but we were somehow chronologically challenged.
Right. Chris, there's another question related to BERT. They said, how did you select the characteristics of artificial lighting so it won't disturb the nature? Because of course you're living with birds, with animals, with different species. And so did you take that into account?
Yes. I think we have a very... So I think the lighting in BERT is just where it's really necessary to have. We wanted to create in the first part kind of a darker interior, a warm and darker interior, almost like you are in a cave and you're looking outside of the cave and seeing nature. So actually that your focus is always towards the big seamless glass windows, and therefore also the circulation spaces, they are kept quite moody. They have like the core is clad in this dark fabric, in this dark haptic fabric, and it's always about going then towards the branches of BERT and then looking outside towards nature.
Great. Now I have a question that for both of you, and I'm trying to stir the pot a little bit here. When I hear the presentations, Louis, you have a major firm. It has offices in different places. I would say in some ways it is a firm that's existed for years and approaches architecture in maybe a more traditional way, evolving and of course using daylight, technology, research, many sources of inspiration, but you still have the reality of a firm with many people working in major cities around the world. And on the other hand, we have Chris, who knew something about that, but abandoned that for a more alternative place. Now, I don't think an alternative type of office, but rather reduce the size of the office, approaches things in a more craft-like way, perhaps. Craft not in terms of handcraft, but the practice of architecture is more small. And that's very good, but Chris's office is not going to be building our cities, and that's where we need to live if we need density, if we need to be together in a healthy place in the future. On the other hand, maybe there are some things that Chris's office could teach us. So here's my question for you, Louis, and then my question for Chris. What would you take away from Chris's presentation? What are the things that you would say, hey, I'd like to work with him on this, or I want to know more about his approach, this project, because I really think it could be valuable for the way we do business at our firm. And Chris, the same will be for you. It sounds very romantic, what you're doing. It sounds beautiful, but it's really not a model that everyone in the world is going to follow, which is fine. But what can you learn from a firm like Louis is leading? And where do you think the most interesting aspects of that firm reside? Louis, you want to take it away?
Yes, I think it has been, Chris, very fascinating. And one of the things that I really take away is that this way of bringing the countryside into the cities, because one of the things that we've been working with is kind of bringing nature closer to people. But this is a more radical kind of approach you have, that you bring the food production, you bring basically the aspects of the countryside directly into the cities. And I think that is a fantastic thing. I think we still need some acceptance of that, because it have also implications on what it means with the street and how you access places and parking regulations and all that. But I think that's a very strong one. I think the I wouldn't say treetop house, but the one in the mountains and forest is a more like exclusive thing that's fun and nice to have. But the other one, the big project you show here, is and also interesting that they adopt this in Canada and Berlin, like the two forward-thinking places, is kind of taking that in right now, where most of the big developers or clients are wanting even more taller, more dense buildings all around. So I think there's a lot to learn, but I think it's a kind of a movement, and that's why I think it's so important that we have these discussions and show what we're doing, because there's this inspiration that goes across, and you can see we have these very big clients. I would say when we start an office, we are like you, very small, and we also lied with the first client in New York, to be honest, because we
an architectural thing.
We didn't have anything basically, and they asked what was the address, like West Broadway. We just tested the waters here. So no, but it's about bringing in this inspiration, and then you kind of push a little bit the boundaries, because I think the revolution sometimes doesn't really work, where the construction industry and developments are so financially driven. It's about the profits, it's about return of investment, also secure investments. Then it's a very conservative world, and somehow by pushing it is a bit. And I can just give an example. We did the design for a huge high-rise in New York, in Manhattan, and we had a lot of balconies and stuff on it. And the developer said, no, you have to, after winning the competition, you have to take it away because nobody wants to go outside. Then 1.5 years went, and suddenly come back and say, you have to get the balconies back, get all the green back, because the clients want this suddenly. Wow, isn't it strange? The tenants want it. And I think that's not because the developer really wanted to bring it back. It was because there was a public acceptance or demand that you have to do something. And that, I think the projects you are presenting here is kind of pushing that and also showing that it's possible. And I'm really looking forward to see Berlin and Montreal.
And Chris, what about you? What would you say is our lessons that you could learn from Henning Larsen?
Thank you, Louis. I think that what I'm somehow really envy is that you, as Henning Larsen, you have so many expertise already underneath one roof. I mean, there are so many different opinions and different people and colleagues, and there is really a kind of a way you can build up an office culture. And within this office culture, there are specialists for a lot of the topics that are in architecture these days, and architecture became really complex. So these people or these expertise is also needed, and I think it's beautiful when you have this underneath one roof. But I also know that what it takes me or Faye and me to actually get there, and we need to go through the size of an office that is like 20 to 50, which is such a bad size of a building. I think you can be really innovative as a company when you're either very small, when you have no backpack at all of responsibilities, of computers, of people, and so forth, or if you're really big. So you have then a certain part of your team who is just doing innovation and pushing this kind of boundary that Louis talked before a bit further. I think you can do that as a small office or as a really big office. But being 20 people, this is a weird size as an office, and we have been 20 people in Beijing, and I just don't want to do it anymore because I'm more like managing the team than really designing. And so we try somehow to stay small, but when we get a bigger office, then we collaborate with people or with other offices. It's somehow, I like that somehow in the music industry, you know, that bands play with other bands and they get featured. And maybe, you know, this is also a path then as a small office, that there are a lot of other small office or big office, you know, that you can collaborate with. And I think with 80% of our projects, we collaborate with other studios, with young architects, with architects that have a different kind of skill set. For example, one of the last projects we did with Arthur Mamou from London, and they are very good in rapid prototyping, 3D printing, and we 3D printed a structure out of sand, the largest structure. And this just could happen because you have two offices that have their skill set in a bit of a different way. So either you are that big as Henning Larsen and you have the skill set already in your firm, or you then collaborate with other offices. And I really like that, because this is also then good for the team, you know, getting to know other people and learning from other people, and so forth. But I'm a little bit jealous that this expertise Luis has already in his office, and I will never get to a place where I can have this in mine.
But just building on it, if it's okay. When I started, we were 23 people in the Henning Larsen, and we were struggling basically always, because we had exactly what you say, this size where we were too small and too big at the same time. So that was a problem. But right now, our research team is bigger than the original office, just researching in microclimate, daylight, materials, robots, 3D printing techniques and stuff like that. So, and that's a luxury to have that's for sure. And what has also been a bit, let's say, an eye-opener the last years have been how much it really drives the architecture in a way that you open possibilities you didn't have before. Suddenly we're doing buildings where the concrete walls are 4 centimeter thick instead of 20 centimeters. When how do you do that? You couldn't do it by hand because it would kind of fall apart, and you couldn't get it into the mold because it wouldn't be. But because you have the 3D print technique with concrete, suddenly you can do it. And we're doing projects like that now. So I'm foreseeing that this, as you talked about, also the technology comes in and can do stuff. We just need somehow to know what we want to do with the technology. So that's important. But the last thing I want to say is that, yes, we should work together. I think that would be fun.
I was going to suggest the same thing, yeah.
Let's talk about that after.
I would think, Kevin, probably you and I would say, don't forget to work with academia, because this is another area where we've seen today in the previous sessions how researchers are making doing lots of applied research and working with professional firms and bridging the gap between the two. Yeah. And I think in the future we'll see that even more, that the ivory tower doesn't exist, but partnerships with private firms, public sector, and academia is probably the way to go.
But we are, I am sure you also, we are working with academia because you can't do this without.
Absolutely.
So a lot of the funding that also goes into this comes from shared programs we are doing. And there's huge, amazing things happening out in academia at the moment that are getting, let's say, on tracks here as we are bringing something on tracks. So it's like, it's a good partnership. Before, when I was starting as an architect, there was almost like a Berlin Wall between praxis and academia. It's like they lived a completely different life, and you had to choose where you want to be. And I think the richness today is to see how many that are teaching and practicing at the same time. Yeah. And I think places where you don't allow that is totally wrong, and we should, try to discuss it. I think in Denmark, it's difficult to practice and also be in academia, but it is really enriching to do it. But the last thing is that it's interesting that the public sector starts to be a partner, and that's a new thing, because usually you could have the worst client you could have would be the public client, because that's like short-term, lowest price, you don't hold accountable, next election time, 4 years, doesn't matter, we are new people on. But suddenly we're seeing a much more cautious way of thinking, and also I think the politicians are being kept accountable, even though they're not in the seat anymore.
Exactly. One quick question, and it's a little bit out of the box, and for both of you, how do you think the development of electric cars will influence architecture? I would say they talk about electric cars, but I would say, are there other inventions coming down the pike that will be extended in our cities that will affect architecture? Quick answer?
Yeah, we are studying a lot of mobility at the moment, and it will change the whole way of doing urban planning, or like master planning in many ways, because you don't need to have the orthogonal systems, which have never been good for cities. And look at what's happened through history and learn from that, how you work with the climate and you bend your streets because it gives best protection in wintertime, stuff like that. You have a possibility to do that again with this new kind of mobility.
Yeah. Chris, any comments on mobility or other inventions coming down the pike that will influence your architecture?
Maybe just a quick question a quick answer on this one, that I think, yes, e-mobility has the potential to change something as long as we are changing our consumerism, because I don't think it will change a lot if we are building bigger SUVs made in electro. But if we really change towards, smaller cars as well, fine, and you don't need to go, full speed everywhere, I think then it has the potential to change as well. But also the mindset of people needs to change with it.
Great. I think on that note, we can end the Q&A.
Yeah.
And Kevin?
Well, yeah, so thank you both for really a tremendous wrap-up to our day. Such a sort of optimism, I feel, about where we're at and where we're going, even though, you said it's going to stir the pot. And we need to turn up the heat now, right? Because we have global climate change that is, becoming more and more of a concern. And the whole ethos of the Build for Life conference is about reversing climate change and creating healthier places for people. And I look forward to a Henning Larsen Studio Precht collaboration in that regard. It would be really exciting to see the fruits of that effort. So the arc of today was light plus health to start us off this morning, followed by computational design, and then just now kind of bringing it to another level of reality by looking at a lot of really different fascinating projects that took the theory and bridged the gap and brought it to practice. I think what we need to look for are find these moments for innovation so that we can, turn up the heat, if you will, or perhaps turn down the heat might be the best, more apropos phrase, so that we can make the change that we need and really ultimately have a healthier planet, healthier people, and probably live a little better along the way as well. So thanks for joining us today for day one. And Martha, you're going to tell us a little bit about tomorrow?
Well, I can tell you that if today was interesting, inspiring, and exciting, tomorrow will follow that same path. And so I'd like to invite you to join us at 10 a.m. European time tomorrow morning, when we'll be looking at daylight in architecture Asia. This will be the component of this symposium that will be coming to us from China. And again, it's helping us be more international, to understand that the world is getting smaller and smaller, and we have so much to learn and share with each other. So thank you for today. Thank you for joining us. Kevin, it's been a pleasure to share the stage with you today. I look forward to tomorrow. And we hope that you will join us at 10 o'clock European time tomorrow morning for our session on daylight in architecture Asia. Good night.